Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to make some thick cut pork chops with a kind of herbes Provence seasoning. Then we're going to top them with some crispy onions per my son's request and some rosemary and herb oven roasted potatoes and some sourdough cheddar bay biscuits. So let's start by getting our kind of herby butter that we're going to pour over our potatoes to roast in the oven. We're going to melt that and we're going to put some garlic and rosemary in and let it kind of simmer for a little bit. And then we'll while we prep up our potatoes. So we want a good amount of this butter to kind of drizzle over all of the potatoes to roast. So I've got about, 4 or so tablespoons of butter in there. I'm going to turn it on to, like a 7, so like a medium high, so it can start to kind of bring up those flavors. And then we're going to use a couple cloves of garlic. I'm going to mince it up and add it in there to bring out those lovely flavors. These are like Hulk's cloves, are massive. They're giant. But it's going to be about a tablespoon of minced up garlic. Here we go. And I'll get this in that butter that's melting so it can kind of let out its lovely flavors. And then we'll be able to pour this over our potatoes and let them roast up in the oven with this nice kind of herby butter on it. There we go. And you don't have to mince them to a paste, but just a nice kind of smaller mince works up well. The more cuts you make on those garlic cloves, the more flavor that's going to come out. Okay, we're going to add this into our butter. Now, I'm going to turn my butter down a little bit lower now that it's got a good melted bit on the bottom, because I don't want my garlic to get too toasty in there. So I'm going to bring this down to about a 4. I'm going to give this a good swirl, because I want the garlic to infuse into the butter. And we're going to get some fresh rosemary. And you know what? I think just one good size, branch will work. I'm going to take it off of the little stick here. So just take off all of those little leaves. We're going to just give it a light kind of chop up. Again, the more you cut up this herb, the more you cut up rosemary, the more flavor that's going to enhance into the butter. Now, you can always use dry rosemary if you want. I would, if I was going to use dry rosemary, I would get my mortar and pestle out and kind of crush it up so that it's not super crunchy, and allows a little bit more flavor to come out. Here we go. So I've got my fresh rosemary, which is about, I want to say, a teaspoon and a half, all kind of cut up here. We're going to put that in here with our garlic and our butter. And then we're also going to throw in some green onions or scallions. I'm going to cut off the little bottom tips. And we'll throw this in here. And this is going to give it a nice, really mild kind of fresh onion flavor to it, which will be lovely. So we're just going to do a nice little small mince up on them. And we'll add this again into our butter. And then the last things that we'll be adding to our butter once it's completely melted is a little bit of garlic, salt, and black pepper and onion powder. I'm going to grab a spoon here so I can give it a nice little toss, a little stir. And again, low and slow. You don't want to have, burn your butter, and you don't want to over crisp your garlic, because it is going to go into the oven and it's going to bake up. So I'm going to give this a nice stir, and we're going to let it kind of simmer. While that's simmering, I've got a bunch of little red potatoes that we're going to quarter, or some of them we might eighth because they're bigger, but just a nice kind of smaller size on here. so that we can kind of drizzle our potatoes with these, or drizzle our butter over the potatoes. Here. And then we can have these in the oven roasting while we're prepping up everything else, because the potatoes will kind of take the longest. I was trying to figure out, how do I want to do my potatoes today, because Torn was like, oh, can we have crispy onions? And I was like, oh, sure, we can do crispy onions. Those will be lovely. And then I thought about doing like a mashed potato and a gravy and whatnot, but we had mashed potatoes like a week or so ago, so I didn't want to kind of do a repeat so soon with mashed potatoes. I like to spread it out. I haven't done a good oven roasted potato in a while, so I figured, why not today? So I'm kind of quartering these all unless I have one that's pretty big. And they'll have these just nice little kind of potato wedges. Here we go. And you could use it also, like you could use a Yukon Gold potato for this as well. Fingerlings would be great. If you were going to use a russet potato, I would give them a little bit of a peel first. Because sometimes that skin can be a bit more chewy. It's not as delicate and doesn't cook up as nice. And I will say the herb infused butter right now smells fabulous. You can really smell the garlic and the rosemary. It just smells wonderful. Okay. So I've got all my little potatoes here. My butter is looking pretty good. I'm going to add in some of our onion powder to add in here. We're going to do about a tablespoon of onion powder. And then we're going to do, about a half a teaspoon of black pepper. And for our potatoes, we're going to do about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of garlic salt. I'm going to give it a nice stir, and this is going to make kind of a nice paste that we'll be able to coat our potatoes with. Here we go. That smells wonderful. I'm going to turn this guy off. Let me get my baking sheet over here. And we're going to get our potatoes on the baking sheet, and then we're going to spoon and kind of toss our potatoes with this lovely flavor. But I'm going to keep all my potatoes in a pile in the middle, so it's easier to kind of coat all of the potatoes. Okay, so just make a little pile here. And then we're just going to kind of spoon it all over, and then I'll get some tongs to toss it because this is going to be hot, so you don't want to burn yourself on some hot butter. But it does smell fantastic.
Can you go over what is all in that?
Yes, so we started out with about half a stick of butter, so 4 tablespoons of butter. Then we added in about a tablespoon of minced up garlic, about 1 little spear of rosemary. We let those kind of simmer in the melted butter for a good minute. And then we added in about a half a teaspoon of black pepper, a tablespoon of onion powder, and about a teaspoon and a half of garlic salt. So, and green onions. We added in about 3 green onions chopped up. So they have this just really lovely herbal aroma to it right now. But make sure you coat your potatoes all up in this nice butter, because if you don't get butter on every bit of it, then you're not going to get a nice little crispy edge on the areas that don't have the butter on it. And that's where all the flavor is too. Here we go. Whoop. Potato overboard. And then now we're just going to spread it out. Try to make sure we don't have any potatoes like on top of each other crowding. It doesn't matter if they're facing skin up or skin down. Either works for it. Let's see, just make sure you don't have any stuck together. There we go. I think this guy's stuck together too. I have a couple of them that are There we go. If they're stuck together, they're going to take longer to cook and they're not going to get all of that great seasoning on it. Okay. Beautiful. We're going to, since this is a nice herby spatula, we'll use it for our pork chops in a little bit. But let's go get these in the oven because, again, our potatoes are going to probably take the longest out of everything we make, especially because they are a slightly bigger cut on them. I have my oven baking just on the regular bake at 400 because we're going to be baking our cheddar bay biscuits at 400. I'm going to start them on the top, but when we put our biscuits in, I'll drop them down a level so the biscuits can have that nice top heat. Okay. While we are waiting for that, we can actually, I'm trying to decide what I want to start off with first. Let's we'll slice up our onion and then I won't dredge them yet, but I'll just have it prepped and sliced. And then we'll go make our biscuits. Actually, we'll season our pork chops first, and then we'll go make our biscuits.
You have a question. How long do the potatoes need in the oven?
These potatoes, honestly, depending on what temperature you're cooking at, but I'm going to do 400 for this one. They're going to take about 30 minutes with it. If you do like a convection bake, you can get it done faster. But since it's going to be sharing the oven with my biscuits, it's going to take just a smidge longer on there. It's going to be really dependent on what size you cut them. If you cut them bigger or smaller, bigger ones will take a little bit longer to it. So, but roughly around 30 minutes, we should be about ready with them. Okay, I've got my onions. These are going to be ready for us to kind of dredge and fry up here in just a second. And I'm going to season up my pork chops before we get there. Go over to our biscuits. Okay. And these guys, whenever I see the really thick ones, these are massively thick pork chops. I get them because they are so juicy and tender. And the one trick with keeping them juicy and tender is we will sear them off in our pan and then we will finish them off in the oven. So that is the one little, that you do a little bit different. You don't just pan fry them the whole time. But we're going to start out with our little drizzle of Worcestershire. This is going to help break down the natural fat in the pork chop and keep it nice and juicy. So, and the trick is we're going to season both sides of our pork chop as well. We're going to do our garlic salt. And since these are pretty thick pork chops, you definitely want to give a good amount of seasoning so that you have it all the way through. We're going to do some onion powder. My son wanted me to do my pork chops, like my sweet pork chops, but I was like, oh, crispy onions and sweet pork chops. We're gonna do a savory one. So I kind of shot him down on that one. A little bit of black pepper. Here we go. And then our main kind of seasoning that we're going to do is we're going to do some herbs de Provence, which is like, you think about how you have Italian seasoning. This is like the French version of Italian seasoning. It's their French seasoning. It's got some great savory flavors in there: marjoram, savory, thyme, rosemary, just some great flavors. So we're going to sprinkle this over, and then I'm going to flip each one of these guys over and we will do the exact same on the other side. Here we go. And this is what I do is like, I consider this a quick marinade in the sense that this will, you put it on there, it's going to give a lot of flavor, but you don't need to sit it in a bag or make sure you prep it for a long time before each one. So again, we've got our Worcestershire in here. Nice drizzle over each one. And then we're going to do our garlic salt. A good sprinkle over each one. And I kind of do it based on coverage on my meat versus like exact measurements. So I do a nice little dusting over it. So onion powder.
Hey, you have a question? If they don't like Worcestershire sauce, what's a good substitute?
Ooh. I was going to say Worcestershire sauce is very distinct in its own, so there's not very many great substitutes for it. But if you like something with more of a teriyaki flavor to it, Dale's works with it. Dale's seasoning sauce, as well as like an A1 steak one sauce. So they're along similar lines of a Worcestershire, so they have that. But I will tell you this: when you cook it up, you do not taste Worcestershire sauce at all. It essentially, the main component of it is to cut through the fat in the pork and make it juicy. You don't taste the Worcestershire sauce. So I know that I don't like Worcestershire sauce straight up, but when I cook with it, it makes everything taste so good. So I would say like try cooking with it first and see if it comes out. And now we're going to do our herbes de Provence. Nice little sprinkle. And again, the trick with this is because this is a quick marinade, you're going to use a little bit more spices, but they're going to be so good. Okay, so we've got my meat all ready and prepped up over here. We will get these searing off here in just a little bit. So I'll have those wait over here. Bring this down. And let's start on our biscuits, and then we will be ready to kind of do our dredging of our onions and for cooking off our pork chops here. So we are going to do our cheddar bay biscuits with our sourdough version of it. So we're going to start by using a half a cup of sourdough discard. So I fed my sourdough earlier, so I just kept my discard in this little jar over here so that I could use it. So for this, we are going to use a half a cup of our discard. So I add this into my bowl. Here we go. And then we're going to add 3/4 cup of milk. And you're essentially going to dilute your discard with that. And this is a drop biscuit, not a like cutout biscuit. Let me grab my dough whisk here, which makes these are really nice because they've got like that lovely flakiness. They taste just like the Red Lobster's cheddar bay biscuits, but you don't have to do the press and fold. So they're nice. We're going to give this a good little whisk. And now, because these are drop biscuits, we are not using cold butter to cut into it. We actually are going to use a cup or one stick, not a cup, a half a cup or one stick of melted butter.
Yeah, you got a request. Can you go over what sourdough discard is?
So sourdough discard is what you throw away from your starter, or what you discard from your starter when you're about to feed it and get it ready to make bread. So your starter is made from fermented flour and water that's been sitting on your counter, and you feed it every couple of days so you can make sourdough bread. But so you don't have to use a huge amounts of flour and water. You get rid of some of it to replenish it, and you can make lots of recipes with the discard, which makes it wonderful. Okay, I've got my stick of melted butter mixed in here. You don't have to have it super mixed in because it's going to sit on top. Then we're going to add in a teaspoon of baking soda and a teaspoon of baking powder, and these are going to give our biscuits their pop. So there's my baking powder. And there's the baking soda. And then we're going to do a teaspoon and a half of garlic salt. So let me grab my garlic salt over here.
You have a question. Is your house going to be decorated for Christmas the day after Halloween or Thanksgiving?
It won't be necessarily the day after Halloween because I have to recuperate from Halloween, but it will be pretty close. Now, if Evie could have her way, it would probably be at like 12:01, at right after midnight for her because she loves it. But I have a lot of Halloween decorations that we have to put away first before we can get out our Christmas. And I have even more. So I have, I think, was it 17 tubs of Halloween decorations? So I have to put those away first. And I mean like big tubs. And I believe last year when we stopped count at our Christmas, it was 24, 25 tubs of Christmas. 26 tubs of Christmas decorations. So I love going all out, but it does take, and I have to change out my rugs because I have a Halloween rug and I have a Christmas rug because I'm a little crazy like that. But we love the crazy. So yes, I will do it. It will be within the first week. The only thing that upsets me a little bit is I have Sirius XM. Their Christmas channel doesn't start till November 7th. And that makes me a little sad because I like to listen to my Christmas music as soon as November 1st hits. And I'm like the old school Christmas music, like the classicals, 50s, 60s, you know, Gene Autry, Bing Crosby. That's the Christmas I like. Okay, we are going to add in our flour. It's going to be 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and then we'll add in a cup of our cheddar cheese. And this is for the biscuit base. Now, the trick is we're going to get this in here. Don't over mix your biscuits. Those will give you stiff little rocks, and we don't want that. So we got 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And then once I have this barely tossed, I'm going to grate in my cheddar cheese for this. Here we go. There. So we'll mix it all the way up. So, you know, I happen to celebrate, you know, I've gotten earlier and earlier every year, never before Halloween. Halloween has a special time. I do decorate for Halloween after the day after Labor Day. So I get that kind of early too. But growing up, it was always the day after Thanksgiving. I've got it just barely mixed. I told you we don't want to over mix it. Just barely mixed. Now we're going to put in our cup of cheddar cheese, which I'm going to grate up. So and then I'm just going to eyeball what a cup of cheddar cheese looks like. This is a recipe that you can definitely go more on if you want to. You can add like up to like a half a cup more. After 1.5 cups, then it gets a little too dense on there. But I always say, when I typically do it, if I have pre-shredded cheese, it's like 2 good-sized handfuls. But I'm going to just cook it until it looks like what I want it to look like. There we go. And I will say, using freshly grated cheddar cheese is going to give a slightly nicer melt on the cheese in there because it doesn't have that anti-caking agent on it. That should be good. Pop it back in here. Save it for another day. Okay, we're just going to toss this very, very lightly, and then we will shape up our biscuits. I can smell my rosemary and garlic roasting in the oven here. It smells so good. All right, I've got this out. Now we're going to kind of shape these guys together. With this, you are going to make them into little balls, but be very careful. Don't pack them together too hard. The looser it is, the fluffier your biscuit's going to be. And you're just going to put out like a little ball like this. Not sure what, like a racket ball. I feel like that's the size of a racket ball. My husband is questioning my size, but I feel like this is very comparable to a racquetball size.
That's bigger.
Slightly bigger than a racquetball, a smidge bigger. On here, you want them, I like nice big fluffy ones. You can make them smaller. Smaller will cook up a bit faster. But I think it's just easier to make nice big biscuits, less to shape. Here we go. My goal is to try to get 9 out of here. That means everyone, and these will be good size biscuits. Ooh, I actually did it pretty good. Sometimes I get to the last one and it's either way too big or way too small. I think I got them fairly even. Steal a little bit from this one.
You have a question? Are the cheddar bay biscuit recipe posted on your page?
I do not have this one posted, but I think I might make this because this is a favorite, and I've made this several times. So I think I might make this as a recipe card for our members. We're gonna have recipe cards coming out soon for our members, so I definitely think I might make this one. I feel like there's so many recipes every week. It's hard to pick and choose, but this is definitely a favorite. So we are going to pop this in the oven at 400. These cook for about 16 minutes at 400 degrees. If you make them smaller, they'll cook a little bit faster. If you make them bigger, of course, a little bit longer. I'm gonna slide our beautiful herby roasted potatoes down a level. They're getting demoted so that our biscuits can bake up. Now, what makes these biscuits so good, let me put my timer on here, is the herby butter that we will brush over them at the end. That's what really sets them apart and makes them like the Red Lobster biscuits, which are so good. Okay, let's get some dredging. Let me grab my flour. It's hiding over here. Get our crispy onions going, get our pork chops going, so that we can start cooking. Let me grab, it looks like I got a little flour in there, so let me grab and wipe that out real quick. Otherwise. And then let me dry it so we don't get any water splatter. Okay, this is, got my big old honkin' saute pan. We're gonna heat it up. I'm gonna put some oil in, and then we're gonna sear off our pork chops on both sides, and then we'll pop them in the oven to kind of finish off cooking. Here we go. So I don't need a whole lot of oil in here. A nice, I wanna say about 2 tablespoons or so. A good little drizzle on the bottom just to prevent the meat from sticking to it. Let's make sure it gets nice and hot before we get them like searing off. Otherwise, you won't get that good sear on it. There. But let me grab a fork. Let's get our eggs mixed up so we can coat up our onions and fry them off so that Torrin can have his crispy onion straws. He really wanted me to make onion rings, and I was like, oh, not today. Onion rings, they've got to batter them. It takes so much more oil. But I'll make them for him soon one time. He's like, please, can you make the big ones? And I was like, oh, maybe. He's the one who always has big opinions about, ideas about how, things I want to make. He has this wrap that he wants me to make. He wants me to make my fried chicken and then make homemade mac and cheese and then put it inside a wrap and then fry up the wrap on both sides. Because he thinks that would be the best wrap ever. And I was like, you know, I'll make it for you one day. That's a lot of work, though. Okay, we've got our eggs here. Let's make our dredge, and then we'll start warming up some oil to fry up our things. And since I have just 1 onion here, I think I'll be good with about 1.5 cups of flour. You always want to err on the side of having too much versus too little. Now, I know this might sound crazy, but I'm going to add onion powder to my flour for my onion rings because you need a little extra onion. So we're going to do about 2 tablespoons of onion powder. This is going to give you more onion flavor, but it's also going to give you a really lovely color when they fry up. Then we're going to do some garlic salt. We're going to do about a tablespoon, maybe a tablespoon and a half. A tablespoon. Some black pepper. Let me open up. I want about a teaspoon of black pepper, but we're keeping it pretty simple here. We'll add in some panko breadcrumbs in just a second, but pretty simple. Okay. I'm just going to give it a quick toss with my hands because we're going to be putting these onion rings in here anyways. Okay. So I've got my onions here. We're going to do our first dredge, and then I'll take them out, and then we'll do our second one.
You have a question, does it matter what type of onions you use?
I would stick with a yellow onion or a sweet onion or a Val Dahlia. Red onions, white onions are really astringent in flavor, and they just don't have enough sweetness for this. And red onions lose all of their flavor in the cooking process. So we're going to add in our onions here, take them out. So you just kind of want a nice coating on here. You don't need too much. We're going to go in there. This is our first base for it. There we go. So I've got these kind of coated. Now let me wash my hands because we're going to go pop our first level of pork chops in and let them start searing. And then we'll finish off dredging and we'll start frying up our onions in just a second here. But it looks like I've got my oil nice and warm over here. I heard a little sizzle going on. So let me grab my pork chops. And I think this pan is big enough to get all of them in. And we're going to sear these. I'm going to turn it down to, about a 6. I don't want it to burn. But we're going to sear off all of our pork chops in here. Here we go. Yeah, I definitely can fit all of these in. Nice. Even though they're pretty hefty. There we go. And then I've got my last one for right in the middle. There we go. We're going to seal these off, and then we'll flip them to the other side, and then we're also going to sear off kind of the fat sides, and then we'll, of course, finish them off in the oven. Okay, before we get our onions kind of going in the next level, I'm going to put some olive oil in here so we can start frying up. And we want a good kind of layer on the bottom of it. You don't need to have them completely submerged, but you're going to want this is like 10-inch pan, so about a cup of olive oil in here. It's a lot less than using a fryer, but you still need a good amount. Before we put our onions back in here, I'm going to add some panko breadcrumbs. This is going to give them a bit more of a crunch. So we need about a cup or so, and then I'm going to give it a quick toss.
You have a question? What's your favorite comfort food around the holidays?
Ooh, my favorite comfort food is probably soup. I love soup and chicken noodle soup. I just love soup. So I would say that's probably my favorite comfort food. A nice bowl of soup with a grilled cheese. That is like heaven on earth for me. And like a triple cheese, grilled cheese. Like tomato basil soup, and then I can dip my grilled cheese into it. Love it. I know it's one of those things where I know soup, it seems like it's such a plain, not exciting food or whatnot because everything's in the pot, but I love it. I grew up eating a lot of soups. My mom's a great lover of soups too. So I think that's just where my love of soups come from. Okay, I've got my onions here. We're going to go into the egg and back into the flour mixture with the panko. We'll do a couple at a time. And then hopefully our oil will be nice and ready for the first round in just a second. So we're going to kind of coat them here in the egg. And then we're going to go back over here. Now this is a little bit of a messy process. But luckily it's just onions. But it makes it so good. Now, these are not onion rings. These are crispy onion straws. And the main difference is this has a very thin kind of coating on it, like a hand-breaded coating, but it has a lot more onion versus having a lot of like an onion ring, I feel like is, 75% batter to like 25% onion. This is a good like 50-50.
Your request, when you get a moment, can you go over the seasonings on the pork chop?
Yes. Let me get these dredged, and then we'll go over there because we'll be ready to flip those in just a second, and then I can talk about them. And today we did a really simple seasoning on them because I wanted them to go with my onions versus clash. I feel like I do pork chops in so many different ways. Sometimes I do a sweet pork chop or a Cajun pork chop, or sometimes I'll do a breaded pork chop. So there's just like, it's a great meat that is it can take a lot of great flavors on there. Okay, let's get these last ones in there. And I'm going to kind of dredge these fast because I want to be able to flip our pork chops here in just a second. Here we go. So perfect amount, 3 eggs pretty much covered this nice onion. And it was a good size onion. And then what I'm going to do, and I find this is just the easiest way, is once you're done, just pour any of this extra flour over your onions so that we can toss them one more time before they go in to get breaded. But it is kind of a messier process. Okay, I'm going to go wash my hands, and then we're going to flip our pork chops. They should have a good, nice sear on them. That onion powder is going to give them a nice kind of golden edge to them. Beautiful. Perfect. There we go there. We'll flip them over, sear them off on here. And then since they're so thick, we're also going to sear off the fat, the thick edges too. I always like to sear off that big fat band because I feel like it allows it to get nice and crispy when we finish it off in the oven. Our pork chop seasoning, we first covered them in Worcestershire sauce. And then we did onion powder, garlic salt, pepper, herbes de Provence. And yeah, that's it. Very simple. It's going to have a nice kind of savory. Herbes de Provence has rosemary, thyme, marjoram, savory. It's a nice kind of French blend, but it's lovely. Let's check out our oil. If it sizzles, then I'll know that it's ready with a drop of water. Just about. We want it, needs to heat up for maybe 30 seconds more. And then we're going to toss in our onion straws. Now, the trick with the onion straws is don't do them all at one time. Do them in batches so that they get crispy edges on them. If you try to throw all of this in there, you're going to get soggy onion straws instead of really beautiful crispy straws. Okay. It should be nice and hot. Let me drop one in, see how it looks. Yep. I'm going to turn it down now to about a 4.5 to a 5. You want your oil to heat up high, but you want to then drop your onions in and turn it down so that they don't burn, but get a really beautiful golden crisp while making the onion tender inside. And I think that's also one thing that's really different about onion straws versus onion rings. Onion rings, that ring inside never really gets like fried. It is more of a, denser onion. Here we go. Okay, we've got our first batch here frying up. Now, it's okay if you have a couple touching it on there, but again, you don't want to just dump that whole pile in there. Now, while our things are frying up, we cooked up our herbs that we put our potatoes on. I'm going to use the same pan to make our herby butter that we're going to brush over our biscuits because it uses almost the same spices. So we can reuse this pan on there. I'm going to put in our remaining butter. Make sure I get the right one on. There we go. We're going to let that melt, and then I'm going to add garlic salt and onion powder to this, and that's what we're going to brush over our biscuits, which is going to give them the best flavor. So it's one of those things where no need to get another pan out. The only difference was there was some minced garlic and a little bit of rosemary, but that won't make a difference with that kind of little bit of flavor in there. Okay. So I have that. I'm going to turn it to like a medium on there so that it can melt up and get delicious. While we're waiting, I'm going to get out a baking sheet and put some paper towels on so we can take, when our fried onions are ready, we can take them off. You just don't want to put them on like a plain thing. I'm going to put them on some paper towels. And we got our pork chops cooking here in just a second. We're going to sear them off on the sides so that they are lovely. Here we go. So treat your fried food like bacon. Put it on a paper towel. That is going to allow it to stay nice and crispy instead of get soggy on there. Put that on there. Okay, we got our butter is almost melted here. We will know our onions, since we aren't dropping them in like a fryer, we will know our onions are ready to flip when they start to get a nice kind of golden crispy edge around them. So they're still not ready, but then we'll flip them over and we'll crisp them up on the other side. You just don't want to, leave them on one side and keep cooking or you'll burn on both. Okay, let's check how our middle one's going. Beautiful. So now this is kind of where I say it's the balancing act. We're going to take our pork chops up here and we're going to, this nice fat ring on the pork chop, we're going to cook it under direct heat, especially because these are very thick. So it's what I always consider, it's like a balancing act. It's your like house of cards, but with pork chops. There we go. I'm going to rotate my pan. And I do this is because that, you know how pork chops have that strip of fat on the side? Crisping it up is going to allow it to release those juices into the meat, and it's going to give it nicer flavors on it, and it doesn't need too much time for it to flip over there. Okay, our butter is nice and melted here, so I'm going to turn this off, and we're going to add in a little bit of our garlic salt. You want about a teaspoon of garlic salt in here. And then we're going about a teaspoon of onion powder. And this is what we're going to brush over our biscuits when they come out of the oven here in just a second, which is right now. Okay. Beautiful. I'm going to leave that down there. And we're going to go grab it out. Let me grab my things and we're going to check on these guys. Look at these gorgeous biscuits here. They are looking fabulous, nice and golden brown, and our potatoes are pretty much almost done here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change my timer or my oven here to the air fryer setting so that when I pop my pork chops in, they will be nice and crispy. It heats it up nice and fast, but keeps them nice and crispy. Okay. These are our beautiful sourdough cheddar bay biscuits. We're going to let them cool off for just a second, about a minute or two, so that we can then brush them with our butter. But these are made with a half cup of sourdough, and they are chock full of butter, flour, you got baking soda, baking powder, a whole cup of cheddar cheese, and then, of course, you've got some garlic salt in there for wonderful flavors. Okay. I'm going to spread my pork chops out here. Now that we've got them, you see we've crisped up that fat there, so it's nice and lovely. We got to rearrange them to make them fit in here. We're going to pop this in our oven to finish these guys off. There we go. Beautiful. Make sure they're all laying flat on your pan because that's how it's going to conduct the heat in there. So we've got our pork chops here. And these just are going to take about, since we have it on the air fryer setting, they are going to take about 5 or so minutes to finish cooking all the way through. And this is going to allow your pork chops to stay nice and moist and tender. We're going to put these right on top of there. I'm going to set my timer here for about 5 minutes. we'll take our potatoes should be done there. We'll check them and see. I always like to do the kind of the feel touch. How much spring back lets me know whether they're, how far they're cooked all the way through. But we've got our crispy onions here. They are ready for flipping. And so I always like to kind of just go under. We're just going to flip them over. We've got this nice kind of golden coloring on them. Beautiful. And I will say each batch after the first one cooks up a little bit faster, but you can see they're done. And the first side takes longer than the second side for it on our crispy onion straws, which will be great on our pork chops here. Okay. Let's get our biscuits. I'm going to just slide this guy out of the way. And then we're going to start brushing over our butter over the biscuits. And we're going to do it in kind of 2 stages. We'll brush over now and then right before we serve. That way it's going to allow the herby butter to sink into the biscuits. And then the last one gives you that last little fresh butter over it. Get rid of the spoon. And I'm just going to use a little pastry brush here. And we're just going to brush it over the top of it. And then right before we serve it again, we will brush this butter on it to give it one more. But this first layer allows it to sink into that biscuit and give it so much flavor. And again, these are just like Red Lobsters, Cheddar Bay biscuits. Those were, when I was a kid, they were just so good. So we're going to brush them over. I have to say I haven't been to a Red Lobster in a long time, but I still remember those biscuits. I remember my brother in high school. He worked at a Red Lobster, and we were always like, get us the recipe, get us the recipe. And then he was like, it's not a recipe. We just mix a bag together. And I was like, oh, so no secrets could be stolen. Okay, these are looking pretty darn good. So I'm going to start taking our first batch out here. I'm going to use a slotted spoon. That's going to allow some of this extra grease to drip down, but put them again on your paper towel. This is going to keep your onion straws nice and crispy. It's going to soak up that extra grease. So it's really important to do it just like you would with bacon. And it's just going to give you a nice crispy onion straw versus a soggy, greasy one. And I will say, when you're doing like frying in here, I can get about 3 batches of onion straws per oil before I have to change the oil out, because you get too much drip, like stuff that, gets dropped into the pan and then burns. So like when at Thanksgiving, when I literally make onion straws using like 10 to 15 onions. So just imagine 10 to 15 times the amount I'm making right now. I have to change out the oil. I use an even bigger pan, but I can't make it through all of the batches. And mainly that's because I have to make so much because people steal them before I can get them in my green bean casserole. We're going to get this next batch in. Coat it down in here. I think I've got a room for a little bit more over here. There we go. But these are so, so good. And they're not, I always say, these are not onion rings. These are crispy onion straws. And these are the exact kind of ones that I use on my green bean casserole. So I know green bean casserole is a huge thing in the South, but I do not make my green bean casserole like anybody else's. Nothing is canned. Everything is fresh. Fresh green beans that I blanch, fresh cream of mushroom soup that I make homemade, and then homemade onion straws, and they are delicious. Okay, let's go grab our potatoes out of the oven. Since we're right there, we'll check on our pork chops, and we should be about ready here. Perfect timing because there's about 20 seconds left on here, and these potatoes should be nice and ready. So let me kick off this timer here. Beautiful. So here are our gorgeous herby roasted potatoes. I'm going to check real quick on my pork chops, and I'm going to tell you it's my finger trick. You touch them and you, based on how firm they are, is how you're going to be on. So I'm going to come grab these in just a second. I'm going to need 2 hands to carry that one because it's a big pan, but it is ready. So I've got my lovely fried or oven roasted potatoes here with rosemary and onions and garlic. Remember, we made that infused butter at the beginning. And these are our red potatoes that we quartered, but they're just fabulous. About a tablespoon of fresh minced garlic in there with about a whole sprig of rosemary. And we infused that in 4 tablespoons of butter, added green onions, onion powder, garlic, salt. They're going to be so much flavor. Okay, we've got our pork chops. They should be finished off. Now, pork chops, just like with steak or any meat that you cook off, let them sit for about 5 to 10 minutes before serving them. Because if you cut into them while they're still hot, it's going to cause all of the juices to leak out, and then it's going to be a very dry pork chop. So let them sit on here. But as you can see, they've made nice little drippings in the bottom of the pan, which is why I love finishing them off in the oven, because if you take a look here, they're going to have this beautiful golden brown color. I'm actually going to flip each one over so we get this nice juices on the other side as well. But do you see how they have just that wonderful coloring to them? That has so much flavor. Those are the natural juices. And these, when they're these big, thick ones, they stay so juicy and tender. They're just amazing. Look how gorgeous they are. Beautiful. Okay. Since these are, well, there we've got our first batch. I think I'm about ready to serve up. I'm going to put this over it because I know me, and I'm going to try to grab that handle here in just a second. I'm learning with age. Let's finish our last little drizzle of butter over these. Again, this is our finishing of the herb butter. That first one, as you can see, it's soaked into our sourdough biscuits. And now we're finishing them off. And these are like a copycat Red Lobster cheddar bay biscuit, but homemade at home. Okay, I'm going to grab my plate and get ready to serve up dinner. Okay, let me grab a spatula here because I need to get underneath my crispy oven roasted potatoes. Just look how gorgeous they are. You see the areas that were sitting on the baking sheet. Look at that beautiful crispy edge. It's just going to be amazing. Okay, for dinner tonight, we have our rosemary, garlic, and green onion oven roasted potatoes with our pan-seared pork chop that we finished off in the oven, but we seasoned with herbs de Provence, onion powder, garlic, salt, and Worcestershire. We're going to top them with our crispy fried onions because they're just delicious. And then, of course, we will serve them with a sourdough cheddar bay biscuit for a yummy, delicious, and simple Sunday dinner. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page, search for what we made, and you can always watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets. I've got my big, all-clad pan here. I've got my hex-clad, my baking sheets, my knives, all the different gadgets I use in the kitchen I have in there. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.